Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farbach. The conflict widened overnight Wednesday after Yemen's Iran-backed Houthis claimed to have struck two Saudi oil tankers in the Red Sea, days after announcing a naval blockade on Saudi shipping. While President Donald Trump warned the United States would destroy an Iranian bridge or power plant for every attack on vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. The latest developments have added to concerns over maritime security, energy supplies, and the risk of further regional escalation. Joining us now is Dr. Łukasz Fyderek, head of the Institute of the Middle East and Far East at Jagiellonian University. Good to have you with us. Welcome.
Hello and good morning.
Thanks for joining us. So, looking at the latest picture we have right now, it was already very bad in terms of Strait of Hormuz blocking a fifth of global oil supplies and trade. Now looking at the Red Sea being hit, that's another a quarter of container vessels or even more going through there. So tell us how much these two choke points now will affect global trade.
Well, first of all, we should look at the Houthis and both of their messaging and their capabilities. If we look closer at the messaging, we see that the Houthi movement, Ansar Allah party, they've somehow directed their messaging clearly against Saudi Arabia. It is not clear, looking at the message, if they envision the full-scale naval blockade of Bab el-Mandeb Strait. So that is somehow reassuring. The other angle, the capabilities perspective, tells us that, well, Houthis are nowhere as effective potentially as Iran is. Obviously, the Houthi movement, Ansar Allah, is an non-state actor. They do control large part of northern Yemen, but they do lack productive facilities enabling them to produce their own anti-ship missiles or other advanced drones which could be capable of disrupting Bab el-Mandeb Strait on bulk or on a scale which we see in the Strait of Hormuz. So taking into account those two perspectives, I would cautious while assessing perspectives of Bab el-Mandeb blockade by using analogy or straight analogy to the Strait of Hormuz. We have a very different actor, the Houthi movement, with much lower capabilities and their own politics and their own strategy directed clearly against one actor, which is not the US at that point, which is Saudi Arabia.
Interesting perspective. At the same time, I want to press you on two things you said there. One, in terms of Saudi Arabia, I mean, this is not the first time they've been targeted, also by Iran. They have yet until this point been very limited, if not at all, engaging in retaliatory strikes. Do you think that this will be that moment now where Saudi Arabia also gets involved in to a greater extent? And secondly, even if there are only Saudi tankers being targeted right now, the risk level of it is still there, that might actually make shipping companies not take that risk in the first place.
Absolutely. I agree with the second point. The market will take some time before the market will properly assess the risks of hitting and then on hitting the tankers on the Bab el-Mandeb Strait on the Red Sea route. So that is clearly the leverage the Houthis right now do possess. When it comes to Saudi Arabia involvement, Iran is sort of, as we see right now, is a bit cautious regarding their targeting of Saudi Arabia. We see that the Iranian strategy currently has been focused on rather splitting the U.S. allied countries into two groups, those which are attacked and those which are spurred. The attacked one are rather weaker countries like Bahrain or Kuwait, and recently Jordan. So that is. It seems that from a Tehran perspective, there is a clear strategy to divide the GCC group into those two camps, in which those weaker countries will be targeted first. Saudi Arabia is not among them. So that's the Tehran perspective. But let's keep in mind that Houthi movement, so the Yemeni perspective, this perspective in Sana'a, the capital, which they do control, is a bit different. The Houthi movement is fighting their somehow own war against Saudi Arabia, or it's a rather protracted conflict with different phases. Within that conflict, we are basically by Western, let's say, part of the world, we are not putting too much attention to focus on that conflict. But that conflict has the periods of negotiations and the kinetic strikes. We are now entering the second part. But Houthis, besides what we've said already, they need to also take into account their own security within Yemen. They are taking into account the fact that Saudi Arabia recently, in the recent months, consolidated support for their rivals from the south, let's say internationally recognized government of Yemen, and different factions controlling both south of the country and east of Yemen, and that Saudi Arabia, and this seems to be like one of the major obstacles in this current Yemeni or Houthi-Saudi relations. Saudi Arabia stripped Yemen or Houthi movement of the opportunity to rebuild their aerial airline connections to the rest of the world and to Iran in particular. So those are the points of contention and the negotiations, and Houthis are trying to leverage their position, taking somehow advantage of this larger conflict between USA and Iran.
All right. Interesting layer there. I think I just want to get a bit further. You mentioned Western attention. Let's go on that for a moment, because we had now an announcement by Bulgaria that they would allow, I think, up to 8 U.S. refueling planes onto an airbase in Bulgaria. Also, 250 U.S. personnel to that airbase. With that as well, that is looking at what the UK has done under new Prime Minister Mr. Burnham, who said that he allows now American planes to do attack runs potentially from the UK. All of this combined. Now, the Bulgarians have said they're not party to the conflict. That's the message that's coming out politically. But Iran has already threatened retaliation. There have been protests in Bulgaria. Do we see more of an involvement of European NATO allies? Because very much in that declaration of NATO, I believe in Ankara it was, there was wording specifically about this. It was a little bit vague, but it was about the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, absolutely. When we talk about the widening of the war geographically, it is what's happening. The involvement of sovereignly, let's say, located European NATO allies is the logical consequence of the phase of the war in which we are right now. It is a war which which cannot, hopefully, or at least I don't perceive it as a probable, that it will widen in the other domains than the air domain and naval domain. So this war has no potential, or very little potential to spread into conventional warfare fought by army on foot or mechanized army. But definitely this war has a potential for that geographical spread. U.S. involvement of Bulgaria, or let's say, or usage of Bulgarian military bases is perfectly logical from a military standpoint. For Bulgarian politicians, it's a problematic issue, because you are a part of NATO, and U.S. is your major security guarantor, but this guarantor has been engaged in a war which is definitely not in the Bulgaria's interest. The Ankara summit, which you recalled, proved that there were some tensions around this European involvement or lack of it towards the U.S. intervention. But it proved also that the U.S. President Donald Trump is quite selective when we talk about his criticism of NATO allies, while being critical towards some NATO members. He was not very critical towards the other, and by that I mean Turkey, in which the summit took place. And obviously there are many contexts to that, with the personal relationship between Trump and Erdogan being probably the most important factor in that puzzle. So taking it all into account, I see, and I'm afraid of this widening, the geographical widening of the war. The other states may or are already part of that, and by that I think particularly about the Russian involvement in intelligence intelligence sharing with the Iranians, and that's the other somehow aspect of that widening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and about that topic as well, widening of that conflict. I remember that strike on the RAF base in Cyprus at the beginning of that war with Iran, and that'll be on many people's minds if that will be another threat. Now, look, we'll close it there. Thanks so much. That was our guest chair this morning, Dr. Łukasz Fyderek. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
And thank you for watching World Talks, but do stay right here on TVP World for news and commentary. Goodbye.